Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. I'm Michael Chikeen, and today in the virtual studio, I have with me Amanda Collins Johnson. Amanda has a bachelor's degree in education in English and is a homeschooling mother to 3 daughters. And she's written a book called Beyond Survival, Reclaiming My Life After I Survived Rape. Amanda has been featured on several podcasts and publications and on Fox and Friends and The Glenn Beck Show. She has shared her story on college campuses, at women's conferences, and at law enforcement conferences. So, as uncomfortable as I already am, I'm very grateful to have Amanda here today and grateful that she's willing to share her story with us. So, let's dive in. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I guess we can kind of just start from the beginning, because we spoke a little bit before the interview started about your writing process and how that's kind of cultivated a lot of thoughts on this topic. So I guess maybe we can start why you decided to write the book about your experience, and then we can go back and you can share with us the experience itself.
Okay. Why did I just start to? I never really thought I was going to write a book about this particular subject, or if I did, it was going to be more politically driven, if you will. And I did a lot of lobbying immediately after my attack, or somewhat after my attack, to just change some laws for women to be able to choose how they want to defend themselves. And in that process, it became very, very clear to me from the reactions I was receiving from people that as a whole, our society everywhere really doesn't care that women are being raped every minute of every day across the globe. And that is a really strong statement. And I know that it's somewhat of a blanket statement, so stick with me because I don't want to offend anybody. But I say that because when I would sit down with lawmakers privately, or even after conferences, I would get comments and questions about, well, what were you wearing? Is there anything that you could have done differently? Or after they hear my story, they give me an anecdote of what I could have, should have done to prevent my attack. I've been asked, well, shouldn't you just get over it by now? Can't you just move on? It was only a few minutes of your life. Get over it. And I've been told a lot more vulgar things that I'll spare your listeners from. And
I don't know. You can be as vulgar as you want here. Kind of, and like joking aside, part of me thinks that maybe we need to hear these things because these are things that you had to deal with after already dealing with probably the most traumatic thing that ever happened. So if you wanted to share the nonsense that people are throwing at you for sharing your experience, like I want you to feel like you can here.
Well, thank you. It is in my book. I didn't hold like any punches, but so in the same, right, like in the same moments or in the same conferences, I would always have a line of women waiting to talk to me because they too had been raped and and for a lot of them, I was the very first person that they ever confided in. And then on the other side, I would have reactions like, stop embedding fear in women. Your case is just so rare. At least you were useful for one night. are you like, they wish that they would have, or like even online, like, you know, the keyboard warriors of like
Right.
receiving messages of, well, don't act like you were a virgin before it happened. It's not that big of a deal. Are you sure you didn't want it? There's so many, like, it
Oh God.
is mind boggling to me. And so as there's this like this tension right on both sides of so many women coming and telling to me, I've never confided in anybody, and then getting these reactions, I see why these women are not confiding in anybody, women and men, really, because men do get raped as well, and that's like talked about 0%, really,
Right.
or just very, very little.
Yeah,
And so
I appreciate you saying that. I was reading some things before this interview, and that was one of the things that I googled, and that's the one thing that nobody will talk about, that it is
right.
possible for a man to be raped. Like there's even like, you know, some
Hmm.
podcasts I've listened to where they make jokes where it's like it's not possible to rape a 14-year-old boy. A woman can just let him fuck her, and I remember hearing that and just like it was just so sad. And I don't know, maybe 10 years ago I probably would have laughed at that joke and been like, yeah, they're right, you know.
Right.
And so like I think we all understand how terrible the internet is, so I can't say I'm so surprised to hear the keyboard warriors tossing out this awful toxic nonsense. But I hate to say it, but like I am surprised that someone would come and up to your face and say something horrific like that, as if they felt so compelled that like they had to wait in line to do it. Like that's messed up.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it just, like, I have to believe it's because we collectively fail to recognize what rape is at its core and what drives the rapist, where the incentive is not sex. It's really not about sex. It is about violence and control. And it is about overpowering another human being and dehumanizing them through the vehicle of sex. But rape at its very core is soul murder. And there's really no way around that. And so um I started an organization called Tear Speak, and it stands for Teaching and Empowering Assault Rape Survivors. And it was about like the core of it was to educate society about the lifelong effects that rape has on an individual, to equip the loved ones that are walking alongside survivors, and then to also empower survivors to live beyond surviving, to live beyond. And what I mean by that is, by I was left alive by my attacker, I was continuing to exist, but that doesn't mean that I was living a full life. I was meeting all these milestones. I was meeting all these, you know, I got married. I had 3 kids, and I was doing all the things that people were saying, "Wow, you're such an overcomer. You're such a survivor." But the reality was is that I was so numb inside to just be able to continue
Wow.
existing, and I knew that there had to be more for me than just that. And I wanted to live and reclaim my life. I just didn't know how. And so I started this journey of that on this, you know, with Tear Speak. And it just really led me to write my book, to expand my reach, to do all those things that I just outlined, as far as educating society, equipping loved ones and law enforcement and anybody who works in a vocational capacity with survivors. And then also to just empower survivors to see, so that they feel seen, that they know that they're not alone, and to know that reclaiming a life after such a horrific event is possible.
Right. Wow. Firstly, that's a great acronym. That Tears Speak is
Oh,
that's pretty awesome. So
thanks.
kudos to how smart that is. Um, on top of that, it's do you think there are any analog comparisons between analogies between like rape survivors, but also people that survive like physical assault as either children or in um, I don't know, even if someone is attacked in the street, and just that idea of powerlessness. Um,
Yeah,
do you think there's a lot of commonalities between these people for how they move through life after that event?
I do. I tend to, so a lot of people will tell me, when they divulge or when they open up and trust me with their story, they'll always, a lot of people will start it with, well, it's not as bad as yours. It wasn't as bad as yours. I'm like, no, no. Bad is bad and trauma is trauma. We cannot, like, if we're going to heal, we have to acknowledge the extent of what was done to us. And I always use this kind of analogy, and a lot of my stuff is faith based. Actually, I'm not going to hide behind that, but so I have to like use this analogy that when your house is broken into and you call the insurance, they tell you to itemize everything that was taken so that they can reimburse you or compensate you for what was stolen. And in the same way, we can't reclaim what was taken from us if we're not willing to admit what it was. If we're not willing to acknowledge it, then we can't even go there. And
Right.
so there's a lot, while it is hard, it's not easy and it is painful. There is a lot of, it's necessary, and there's a lot of freedom, ironically, in acknowledging and accepting the gravity of what's been done to
Sure.
an individual to be able to move forward. And so I think you bring up a really good point that that was a very long-winded answer to say, like, trauma is trauma and bad is bad. Like it doesn't need to be on this scale of worse or better. It just is. It's crap is
Right.
crap, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter it's how you store
mm-hmm.
that memory and how you've understood it. Like even if it's violence from someone or don't know, like bad is as reductive as it sounds. I think I understand what you mean. I guess at this point, do you, because it's in your book, and it seems like it's pretty germane for us having the rest of the conversation. And do you mind taking us through the experience that you did have, and then
No,
we can go from there?
sure. Yeah, no, not at all. Which, like, kudos to you. This is the longest I've gone into a podcast without like sharing my story right away. So I am impressed. Um, so yeah, my story is when I was in my fourth year of college. I technically was still a junior because of credits and stuff like that. Um, it was during midterms. It was a Monday night in October, and as we were leaving our class, I left with a group of people because it had been ingrained in me that there's safety in numbers. And as we approached the parking lot that was just across the way from where the college classes were being held on the campus, I was the only one that had parked on the ground floor. And I had parked in that specific parking garage because it was presumably safer to walk there late at night than it was to walk across campus to off campus parking at like 10 p.m. I parked my car less than 50 feet away from the campus police office, and I was on the same floor that they parked their cruisers at night. I wished the group a good week, and they went up. I didn't see anything between myself and my vehicle, and I started making my way to my vehicle, and it became abundantly clear to me moments later that what I had not seen was a man that was hunched behind the wheel well of a truck in a sedan. And he overcame me, placed a pistol to my temple, and then he brutally raped me for several minutes. He would go on to kidnap and rape a second victim, and he raped and murdered his last known victim. So when I say, like, I was left alive, I legitimately survived because it very easily could have been me. Right. He was eventually caught by the Reno Police Department, and he was, charged with all the charges and eventually convicted for, like 3 counts sexual assault, 1 count of kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and murder. And he's sitting on death row while he's also serving 4 consecutive life sentences in Nevada.
Oh my God. Did finding out what, because how did, like, I guess when you filed the report, you gave a sketch artist to and like you had to identify and eventually found out that this was the guy that they caught for something else. Did it make the memory of your experience worse finding out that he had done so much damage to his other victims? Like, I mean, like killing one and...
Right. I think, yeah, I've had to process through that a whole lot. And it's in my book. I didn't initially report my assault, which is incredibly common. And I talk about kind of what I went through and like the thought process and being in shock and why I didn't initially report. My roommate was the one who went to the police because I had confided in her what had happened to me, but I didn't want to make a report. And once the young woman who was murdered was missing in the town, like everyone was looking for her, my roommate was the one that came to me and said, "Hey, you need to file a report." And I said, "Absolutely not. I'm going to look like a crazy person. I'm going to look like somebody who is wanting attention. And I'm not doing that." Like that's, and to be honest, I didn't want to come to grips with the fact that potentially this was the same individual as well that had done those things. And so she was the one that contacted the police kind of as like a lead of like, "Hey, you need to go talk to this person because this is what happened to them." And they reached out to me. And once they reached out to me and said, like, "Time is of the essence. We need to speak with you because you may know something," I complied, but I really did believe that they were just going to get my story, that it was not going to be at all connected, and I was going to go about my way. And then it was, "We think you saw him. Can you please sit down with a sketch artist and help come up with a composite?" Because the second victim had not seen him because he broke her glasses. And so she couldn't see him, but she had like a physical description. And so it came out in trial that they truly believed that if he had been aware of the fact that I saw his face to the extent that I had, that he would have killed me. And that was God's grace over me.
Yeah, a couple things if you could help me understand. So, like,
sure.
Well, why did he not think that you could see him? And did he assault you like just on the ground beside your car?
I was across the way from my vehicle, just on the ground in public. Yeah. On the parking garage. And then, he had like a hoodie pulled over his face. And when he stood up, I saw like the profile of his face out of the corner of my eye. But it was just like so instant, that it just was, but it seared itself into my memory. And so I think because it was dark and because of the way he had a hoodie over his face, he didn't think that I could see him or that I saw him at all.
Oh my God. That that is like a really awful movie that no one wants to watch. Like, you know what I mean? Like that
Hmm.
scene that everyone is on edge. Like I'm so sorry to hear that happened to you. Like, especially like you're in a safe place coming from with friends, you're in school, like Jesus Christ. Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay. No,
Um,
that's okay. I mean, there's definitely times I'm not going to make a lot of friends in like the church community saying this, but I think about my story and I'm like, what the actual
yeah. Swear as much as you
like,
want on the show. I like, well, because one thing that I didn't really even realize until earlier today. I was on your Amazon page for your book, and you say a lot about your
Mhm,
faith on there. And then I saw that
mhm.
you have appeared on like the Glenn Beck show and Fox and Friends shows. So I was really interested where, because like that's very different. Like those news sites are very different from my worldview. Like
Right,
I'm a non-believer. I live in a very liberal part of the world. You know what I mean? And
right.
that's the op. And my instinct is to think that normally people, men that watch a lot of those shows, would be more likely to be the ones to say, well, what were you wearing? What were you doing? What were you, right? So like, and I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's my perception of that. And so
Right.
I'm really curious for how you've found your community within the church or politically, if you're to the right. Like, how,
Yeah.
how have people responded to your story?
So the reason why I ended up on like Fox and Friends and the Glenn Beck show and all the things, I guess I'd have to like take you back. So I was really born and raised in like a conservative household, but when I was 5, my mom told me that my dad and her had made the decision that my sister and I needed to get our second degree black belts to get our driver's licenses when we turned 16.
Whoa.
And that just kind of set like the trajectory of being aware. So, like, when I say that it was second nature to me to be aware of my surroundings, I really mean that. It was and is second nature to me just because of my training and what it was ingrained in me as far as risk reduction.
Right.
And so it, the idea of being responsible or an active participant in your own safety has never been a foreign concept to me.
Right.
And I grew up in a household with firearms. One of my earliest memories is sitting on the workbench with my dad while he was cleaning his firearm after going out hunting. And it was just very matter of fact of like, this is not a toy. This is what it's used for. This is why daddy uses it. You should never touch it unless there's an adult. If you see one, you leave it, and then you go and get an adult. And there was always
Right.
a very healthy respect for firearms in my household as I was growing up. And I consequently ended up shooting competitively when I was in high school. And then
Cool.
when I was, yeah, when I was 21 and turning 22, I realized I just came to grips with the fact that the one equalizing factor for me to be able to effectively defend myself against an opponent much larger than me would be a firearm. And so I asked my dad for my concealed carry permit when I turned 22. That's like what I wanted for my birthday present. So he paid for my class and my background check. And when that all came through, he then gifted me my first concealed carry permit. So at the time of my attack, I had my concealed carry permit, but it's illegal to carry on college campuses. Well, there's some campuses now that allow it, but at the time, and still now in Nevada, it's illegal to carry a concealed permitted weapon on campus. And so, as a law abiding citizen, I left my firearm at home because I could not have it there. And I was consequently legislated into being an unmatched victim that night. And
Sorry, what does that mean? You were legislated into becoming
an
what?
unmatched victim. Like, so the legislation, the law prevented me from being able to effectively participate in my own self-defense. And the law, it has kept me up. I've always wondered what would have been different that night if I'd been carrying my firearm. And I'll concede that I wouldn't have been able to prevent my attack from starting the way it happened. But I know that there's a time during my attack, I would have been able to stop it as it was in progress. And had I been able to do that, 2 other women wouldn't have been raped and a young life would have been saved and would have never even known about this person, about this individual.
Right. This is a really interesting tangent we can go on before coming back. Because obviously where we grew up is very different. Like I grew up in southwestern Ontario, which is like during the safest time I think in the history of humanity. Like, and I'm really not exaggerating. Like there's no wars. Everything was super safe. No one's locking their doors. I go out for a bike ride at 9 a.m. with my friends when I'm 9 years old. I come back home. I do the same thing for my whole life. I'm also from a place that there aren't guns. My grandfather had a shotgun in his living room because he used to hunt. But it's not something that's part of our culture, nor is it in Europe. And I consider these places very safe to walk around. In the U.S. I feel less safe because of all the conceal and carry and all these things. Not to mention, the shootings that are happening literally every day. Doesn't mean the U.S. isn't a safe place, but less safe than the places that I'm normally living in. And with all of that said, these stories definitely feed to that idea of the need to own a firearm, and that was going to be my question. And then, like, because this guy was obviously an insane person and violent, which is pretty obvious from your attack and the attacks he went on to commit. You do think that there would have been a moment where you would have been able to reach for your purse or whatever and successfully, hopefully, destroy that your attacker?
So I'm probably not going to make a lot of friends saying this either, but I am not a huge proponent for carrying in your purse or your handbag because it's very easy for it to be taken away from you. I'm a huge proponent for carrying on person if you're going to carry. And so it wouldn't have been in my purse. It would have been on me. And he wouldn't have known because it would have been concealed. But what's interesting is that the studies that have been done in the US, because we have firearms, right, is that places that have the most gun control laws actually have the most gun violence because the criminals know that the law abiding are going to follow the laws. And then it's free reign for them. So even like college campuses that allow concealed carry on campuses, you don't see mass shootings on those college campuses. And the crime rates on those college campuses fall drastically after they have changed the law to allow concealed carry. And I didn't come on here to intend to like get all into that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we would definitely have a difference of opinion on sort of
and
those
that's
sort of
fine.
Statistics and things like that, which is fine. I was just wondering, do you think, like, let's say more women, let's say, are carrying, conceal and carry on their person. Do you think there's also an equal likelihood that a violent attacker could then take that firearm and use it against them?
Yeah, that's been like said to me so many times that if I'd been carrying, then he could have taken it from me and used it against me. And
I'm definitely not purporting that this is would or would not. Like, I think it's maybe
no,
as likely that you could have defended. I'm wondering what your perspective is.
So my perspective is that I've been told that I would have been worse off from if I had my firearm. And it just really makes me wonder, how much worse off could I have been? I was being raped at gunpoint. And
Oh yeah,
frankly,
he had a gun. Right.
frankly, to be all honest, and not a lot of people would understand this, or maybe more people than I would realize. I would rather die trying to preserve my dignity than to live with the aftermath of my assault. Like, there was a
Wow.
long time that I was very envious of the young woman that was found in a field, because she was given a release and escape that I wasn't, because I was left breathing, but I wasn't still alive inside. I was dead inside. And so I think that you bring up this like interesting thing about like, you know, are there situations where men could, or attacker could take the gun and use it against them? Sure, that could happen. There's a lot of what ifs, there's a lot of could happens. But I kind of look at it as like we're growing up, like we're in this place with our culture where we're all about women's rights. We're all about, you know, like allowing women to make choices for themselves. And all I'm asking is, I'm not advocating for everybody to carry a firearm. I don't think that everyone should. What I'm asking for is, if I choose to defend my body that way, and I go through the classes and I show that I'm competent with my weapon like I'm required to in most states, and I pass my background check, then please let me do that
Right.
as a law-abiding citizen. And so you asked prior, like when we went down this like this long alley.
Yeah, sure.
So that's how I got like into those somewhat like arenas. And I'll tell you that the
That makes
right
sense.
was very the right side of the issue was very supportive and very kind and very how do I say, gentle in a lot of ways with it.
Okay.
It was more the liberal people that I found getting those types of comments from, to be completely honest and candid, of
Sure.
like, you know, like, well, why couldn't you? And I'm not saying that everybody who's liberal is like that. And I'm not saying that there aren't any people who are conservative who say crass things. Just in my experience overall, the percentage was much higher to receive that comment from people. And it was always when I was talking about campus carry. Whenever I was talking about campus carry, that somehow like opened up the door for them to talk about my rape in a vulgar way like that, to like discount my petition, or to discount my I really want women to be able to choose how to protect themselves. And
Right.
that really opened up that opened my mind, or opened my vision, if you will, to the reality that, where I shared before, that people just don't really care that women are getting raped. Because if I'm sharing this awful story and I'm telling this to you, can't you just respectfully sit across from me and say, I'm going to have to agree to disagree with you. I
Sure.
see where you're coming from. I understand how you're drawn, like you're drawing this conclusion, and I respect that. And I'm sorry for what happened to you. I just don't agree with this as being the solution. And then my
Sure.
response would,
Like a human.
right. And then my
Yeah.
response would be, okay, so then let's come up with a solution together. Like, this is
Right.
my solution that I'm proposing. You're saying that's not the solution. So let's have a conversation collectively about how to prevent this from happening. Because that was my plea. Like, let's prevent this from happening to anybody else.
Right.
And so it's like, that's really what I was looking for. And I just hadn't received it yet. And so that's what started the Tear Speak, and then me writing my book, and me really focusing a whole lot more on the education aspect of it, and the empowerment. And really, I find a lot more fulfillment, if you will, in doing that, and helping people reclaim their lives, and equipping loved ones to be able to walk alongside the people that are in their lives effectively, and to walk alongside them well in a way that is helpful and not further damaging. Because I think that also, so at the time of my attack, my husband and I were dating, and people are always really surprised that he stayed with me after, which I think brings in another level of how people view rape. Yes. Yes, I get asked often, wow, he stayed with you? That's incredible. He's such an amazing man. Like, well, I mean, I agree. I think he is an amazing man. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married him. But why is that like but why is that the like determining factor of him being an amazing man? You know, like
You get
why
some
is
crazy shit thrown at you like that. They got that,
mm-hmm.
that stuff is insane because like you said, I agree. Like there's conversations if they're policy driven that are like, okay, well, where do we disagree? Where can we find common ground? How can we enact something that can make sure, like on its basic level, a woman parked in a campus parking garage, that there's a 0% chance of her being attacked there for a non-inconsequential period of time, and that nobody is there to thwart that attack, or that attacker feels like this is a safe place for him to do
Right.
that. Like there's so much from what you said, there seems to be so much conversation to be had to be preventative, that like focusing on, you know, where you disagree or arguing about it is such a waste of everyone's time, not to mention crazy to do to someone that has had the experience that you have had. Like you must like start to hulk out a little bit with some rage when some of these people are saying this to you. Like how yeah, like I'm angry thinking about it, to be honest. So I like, how do you look at there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell called How to Talk to Strangers.
Mm-hmm.
And in that he was discussing who was there? I think there was a swimmer that raped someone, Brock Turner or something like that. Was that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the whole thing's a brutal story. For those who haven't heard, just Google it. And so what Malcolm Gladwell was trying to say in it, and this might be hard to thread this needle on this chat, but saying that like, yes, we don't want anyone to get raped, and a lot of that is the side of men taking accountability for other men and not creating a society in which we think, you know, that, you know, men's domination over women is how things should be. Like there's all these underlying ways to do this, or, you know, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if women can carry a weapon, like you said, like there's all these fundamental things. And on the other side, he was saying that like the studies that are done even on college campuses of people, like if they're getting way too drunk, then both men and women are blurring these lines, and some are like they're just violent rapes and they are raped, and there's some where there's gray area in the middle, and both parties are injured in these scenarios. And his idea was that like this has nothing to do with blaming, but he's saying in these scenarios, can't we agree that if people just aren't getting so bombed at these parties, that maybe we can avoid some of the rape? Like the chapter is so eloquent and easy with how he's saying it, because you can tell obviously this isn't a man who's trying to say that we're trying to blame victims, that if you wear something and walking down the wrong alleyway, that this is their fault. Like that's an insane person that would say that, because obviously like the person that committed that crime, that violation is a monster. And so I wonder how you see that balance for, like you said, like how did you put it? It was really great. Like your active participation in your own in your own safety. Like if, like you said, you have 3 daughters, so this is probably even more applicable to that it will ever be in my life. How do you communicate to them their responsibility to themselves to maybe stay out of an environment where unfortunately maybe there's a few monsters, or to be more alert, and to always be that like I don't know. I don't even know how to word it, to be honest, because it's such a delicate area and a conversation difficult to have.
Yeah.
I'd love if you ever end up reading that book, I'd love if you could email me and tell me what you thought. But
Yeah,
yeah, does
I
that
want
make
to look
sense
it
of what
up.
I'm trying to say?
It does. It does. And I
Yeah.
think that like prevention and, like teaching men and women, because women rape as well, not to like having that conversation. Why does it have to be mutually exclusive? Why can't we do both? Why can't we start the conversation very, very early with our children about consent and about what's okay
Right.
and what's not okay? And like, I don't make my kids hug or kiss anybody in the family because they don't owe that to them, especially if to them that's a stranger. Like, sure, maybe aunt, they're my aunt or their great aunt loves them and has watched them grow up from afar. But if this is the second time that they've met her, they don't owe her a hug and a kiss. And that's fine. Like, it's not disrespectful. It's just respecting their own personal boundaries. And then my aunt graciously says, well, okay, how about a high five then? Or, like, it's really great to see you. Or, like, she respects that and says, that's fine. You don't owe me anything just because I sent you a birthday present or just because I've seen you grow up from afar, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
And
because I mentioned before this call, I got come from a big Italian family, and obligation is kind of part and
oh yeah,
parcel of existing within that. So to hear parents are doing that now, I love it. That like you don't have to give a hug to someone if you don't want to. If you do and you have that feeling, great. But
right.
it's
Yeah.
not an obligation that you have to fulfill just because you're a child.
Right. And just because you hugged them yesterday doesn't mean that like they're entitled to a hug from you today. Like you can decide, like, and I think just allowing that kids to have that anonymity and that control over their own body is really important. And then having conversations about what healthy sex is, because we live in such like a sex saturated culture that it gets skewed, the lines of what healthy sexuality and what healthy sex is and what the purpose of sex is so like, if we're going to be throwing it in our kids' faces every time they turn around, we need to be having some very intentional conversations with them about how sex is meant to be mutually like gratifying to both. Both people should be willing. Both people should be engaged. Both, participants should be willing, and having that conversation of like, it doesn't like ruin the moment to just like say like, hey, this like, like to communicate. A lot of wars could have been prevented if people had just talked and communicated.
Or
and
this idea that women have to be accommodating all the time instead of like having their own voice for like, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to do this, or just I'm going home. Fuck this guy. You know what I mean? Like there's no, recently I've been having these conversations with female friends of mine who said like they went home with men because they felt like they had to, like they had a couple dates and he was a nice guy and he bought them dinner and like, so she felt like, oh, I had to say yes and go home with these things. And like these ideas, obviously as a man, like it never crossed my mind that this is what's happening in the minds of women. And I think, like you said, like that's part of it, that like teaching women that like, no is completely a thing that you can say. Like, this is, this isn't a, just Saudi Arabia or any of these places. And the friends of mine that have daughters, and that we're close, we have these more complex conversations about like, when their daughter gets older, how do you teach them to have this agency is the word we were using, and being like, and one of my friends' wives, so she's like I don't know if I call it. I don't know if she like, but she's a very big feminist, and for how
Mm-hmm.
she thinks in the idea of equality and agency for women and things like that. And she said that, like, yeah, if anyone ever blames my daughter for dressing a certain way or doing a certain way, that's not going to fly. She goes, however, if my daughter's going to a frat party or in these environments where there's probably a high likelihood that there's one monster in that crowd, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's another couple guys that once they get super drunk, they also become monsters. I'm not going to, and she said, I'm not going to tell my daughters that they should go in there and they should just expect to be treated with respect because that's how we wish the world was. That's just not how it works. And it was
True.
funny because during that conversation, there was a bunch of us, and there was other women in that group that were like angry at that woman, saying like, well, but then that's blaming the victim. And it turned, that conversation kind of exploded.
I don't think it's blaming the victim, but why can't women be equipped with risk mitigation? Like, why can't we be equipped with the
Yeah,
knowledge of like avoiding those situations? You know, you're not, how do I even like put this? Like, if, okay, I grew up in Reno, Nevada, so there was certain convenience stores that were very well known for being, you know, like robbed and stuff. And I just didn't go into those convenience stores
right.
to be safe, to minimize the risk. And
Right.
I think that when we bring up, you know, what women were wearing and certain things like that, it does two things. It does blame the victim, but how incredibly, I'm so surprised that men don't get upset with that, because
Hmm.
how incredibly um like just degrading for you guys to be told that you can't control your instincts or your desires. Like
Right.
that is offensive to me, because that's not what manhood is about. That's not what masculinity is about. Men are to be, you know, like protectors, and here I am going like super conservative, but I also do think that like women are to be respected as well. But you
Sure.
know what, I hope what I'm saying is coming across clearly, that like we need to be talking about what healthy masculinity is as well, and not demasculating men, but talk like encouraging them to walk in that in a way that is healthy and empowering to both, and respectful, because it just gets me so angry when people say like, oh well, what was she expecting, what did she think he would do when she walked in on that. I'm like, well, like, why do you just assume that a man would behave that way
Yeah,
just because?
that's a weird thing to default to. Like, I think that person probably has some violence in their life or the way they've seen things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's how the way that they expect a man to be. Like, I think, and even saying all these things that, oh, we need to teach men that they shouldn't rape, and all these, like even I think that's crazy, because I don't think there's any men out there that are capable of violating someone on that level, that if they were to sit through a presentation or one of their friends were to talk to them, they'd be like, oh, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. Like I don't think that's a thing that's ever happened in the world. And like,
Right.
personally, from the research I've been doing recently on men and boys, like I think the better part of the equation is that we need to love boys more, and show
Mm-hmm.
them that their feelings are respected, that they are
Mm-hmm.
respected. And instead, we kind of treat boys like they are broken men. And so it creates this awful cycle that it's mirroring. Like, there was a study
Mm-hmm.
done where they showed a group of people, different groups of people, this baby that looked completely androgynous, that you couldn't tell if it was a man or a boy or a girl. And when they said it was a girl, they'd show the baby crying. People would say, "Oh, it's scared, it's sad, it's worried," and there's this element of care you want to give. But when you show the exact same baby crying and saying it was a boy, people are saying it's angry. It's all these things. And so if we start treating these boys like they're angry when they're not, and don't allow them to be vulnerable and sad and feel love, like, they are going to turn into those men that are incapable of learning that it's not proper to violate somebody like that. And like it's this really crazy society that we live in, that unfortunately we still have to protect, you know, women from these
Mm-hmm.
broken, dangerous men. Like that's obviously a thing that needs to happen. But like it's, I don't know why we don't ever look at the like young boys that come out, like they don't come like there are many psychopaths in the world who don't rape people. Like there are psychopaths
Right.
in the world that like have families and live lives and are good people. Like there's something that happens through a boy's life that unfortunately turns into these broken individuals. And I don't think it's improper to start at one point and not the other. I think we could work at every part of
Absolutely.
the person to
Yeah.
do that. And like so I, I don't know how has your reception been for women that have read your book, or it was just published recently, so I don't know how much it's gotten out there so far, but I'd love to hear
Yeah.
what some of your readers have said.
A lot of my readers have said that it is a hard but necessary read. They appreciate how vulnerable I am, and that they felt like I was just on the couch next to them having a conversation. And I did have the DAs on my case, the district attorneys on my case, read it prior to it being published. And they were so grateful because it gave them insight that they didn't have before as far as working with victims of sexual assault. And a lot of people have told me that it's helped them find healing and given them, like, it's equipped them. I've received a lot of really just really humbling messages from readers about
Amazing.
how much they appreciate my honesty and how candid I am. And I'm so grateful for the encouragement from them because it was not easy to do in that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're very grateful for you. I mean, um, I think one of the things that I think help any of us as humans is just to realize that we're not alone. And
Yeah, absolutely.
even people that I've met that have been through something truly traumatic along the lines of your story, right? We talked before, like there's variations on trauma, for
Mm-hmm.
example. But the people I know that are open and embrace that, like, this is a bad thing that happened to me, opposed to like this is me. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
I see the first type of people really thrive and move forward, and not only that, but also help a lot of people. And I think the people that end up being like, this is me, this event is who I am, and they shy away from even talking about it because there's so much shame. Like, unfortunately, you see it drag them down, and there's not a lot of
Yeah.
help you can even give them, and it's super sad. So it's like, it is empowering to me, even for me read like listening to how you've written your book, and for me writing mine, like it makes me think that I need to share more of myself in that
Mm-hmm.
in that book, and not just stories of other people. I need to give more of my heart, and so you've even inspired me to start really excavating,
Oh,
and,
good.
and sharing what I want to share. And so what one question I keep forgetting, coming back to how you said that you want to champion this sexual education for us to teach kids how important it is, and what normal, normal sex is like, and normal communication. And I'm curious how you reconcile that in your community, and your conversations in like a faith-based community, where from my perspective and friends, good friends that are in those communities, because I grew up Catholic. I still have some of my best friends that are Catholic, and so teach at Catholic schools, etc. And there's a lot of talk about abstinence and all these things, and it always seemed to me that like this was ignoring the reality of teenagers that have these urges, and
Mm-hmm.
that think past this idea of celibacy and chastity, etc. So and your approach seems more along the lines of what I would think would be helpful for kids to actually know what they're facing in the world. So I'm curious how you have those discussions within like a faith-based community.
I'm just pretty real. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it is what it is, you know. But I think though also the conviction to save yourself for marriage is very individual and has to be between that person and God, and then their partner that they choose to marry as well. And so I think that, like, why can't we, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but as far as like when I'm talking to faith-based people, it's like, why can't we do both? Why can't we talk about like,
Yes.
yeah, like save yourself for marriage, and this is why we say this. But also, like, all of a sudden, once you're married, then a light's supposed to go on, and it's supposed to not be bad. Like, why can't we just talk about like sex is normal, and sex is a beautiful gift
Yeah.
that, as a Christian, like from the Lord, for like intimacy and what it's meant for. And just having those conversations about like, this is what it is. It's not just all about like making babies. Like it was meant to be enjoyed, and it was a gift, and it is a gift intended for a specific time in your life, with which for me, like the conviction of that is marriage. But if that's not your conviction, then let's talk about like how we go about that in a healthy manner so that it's stewarded well, if you will, like so that it's cared for, you know, and that there's respect, and it is understood to be what it is.
Yeah. That's stewarded well. I really like, because the idea of ignoring it and not talking about it at all, which is kind of what I grew up with. I grew up in a Catholic system, so but it wasn't as dogmatic as talking about abstinence. I don't remember any of that. I think it was more just talking about reproduction and how the body works, and I don't think we ever talked about sex, and that's it, which kind of fits with Catholicism, to be honest. Like it's like yeah, it's there, but don't worry about it. And then the other side is a more draconian approach that I think is that like everyone has to be abstinent, and this is the only way to do it. Whereas I really like, and I don't like when a religion or people telling me that I have to do anything, but I really respect that other people, if you want to wait until marriage and that's the conviction that you have, all the power to you. I think it's just like marriage, I think is a really noble cause. It doesn't mean that most of them don't end, but like, I think going into it and saying that like, I love this person, or I love my chastity enough that I would like to sustain this until I get married. I think those are all great. But to think that like, that's the way that most teenagers or people in their 20s act, I think is like, it's kind of willful blindness.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I can imagine you have some interesting conversations that, I think to call it real is quite, I think it's even, I applaud you even more, because having those conversations in rooms where normally they're not having those conversations, I think takes a lot more courage than if you're in like a more secular room where like that's a non-topic.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I hate that it's perhaps taken you this awful traumatic experience to like have this conviction but like, honestly, it is inspiring how many people that I can imagine you've helped or will continue to help, because you've kind of owned that, that experience.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you sharing that. Is there,
well, I always tell people, like, when they kind of get upset with me, I'm like, listen, the Bible is not G-rated, and sex is talked about in the Bible, and so it clearly matters to God, and so we should care about it too, and we should be having these conversations as well. But yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm going to finish your thought, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I think sometimes feathers need to be ruffled.
Right.
and conversations need to be had in order for like
Yeah.
change to really happen.
Honesty and reality are such a crazy thing to try to talk about sometimes. Like, something I wanted to quickly change gears for. I don't want to
Sure.
be respectful of your time as well. And I meant to bring this up a long time ago, but I think your story really broke my brain a little bit. And I wanted to cover what are really some of the stupidest things that you're hearing that we can like dispel right now for people like and maybe men that are listening to this and maybe they think because there was an Instagram clip. I hate that I learned this from an Instagram clip, but like um it was a TV show, and seems like a guy was asking this man's wife, and the husband was standing over here and asking this wife about her sexual assault experience, and he was asking her questions like, "Well, why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you do this?" And then the husband takes a knife and puts it up to the questioner's throat and says like, so now you're in a fear response. I'm not going to slice your throat, but you can't do anything to stop me right now. And so it's this idea of this fight or flight. So like,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously that's a TV show written by someone who potentially has never went through such an experience. So I was hoping maybe you could answer that question for guys or women that are perhaps listening to this that are curious but just ignorant. So no one is thinking that you could have Marvel superheroed your way out of that, but they're just literally wondering like why couldn't that have been the thing?
Well, there's not a lot you can do when there's a gun to your head, um, which is where
Right.
I was. But I think it's so easy to assume and predict how you would behave and respond in a situation like that until you find yourself in that situation. And then it changes at times completely. Because I'll tell you, in my martial arts training, we never practiced. What are you going to do if there's a man straddling you with a pistol to your head? Like so it wasn't even like second nature, and there's always like fight, flight, or freeze. And a very legitimate response is freezing because it's just trying to preserve life and
Right.
trying to even process what's going on. Um and so I think I would much rather give people helpful things that they can say to someone if someone was to entrust their story with them. Would be like a helpful thing is, thank you for trusting me with your story. Like I'm so sorry that happened to you. Not that you need to take care of me right now, but legitimately my heart is heavy for you because you've walked through this. Um it was not your fault. No matter what the circumstances were, it
Right.
was not your fault. And this is not who you are. And I think also just saying like, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm here anytime you need someone to just listen to you. Like I'm also, and if you're not aware of what to say, be honest, right? Real and honest conversations. Like you were with me initially, like I'm super intimidated about having this conversation, but I'm going to do my best. And I think that just kind of breaks the ice of saying like, allowing that person to know like you legitimately care and you want to be helpful, you just don't know how. And so offering, like opening that door and that window of that conversation and that communication, and then being okay to sit in the uncomfortable moments. Like we oftentimes, when awful traumatic things happen, we don't need perfect words said because words aren't going to fix it. What we need is for people to show up and shut up. Like just sit with us. Just sit and cry with us. Just sit
Right.
and say like, yeah, that sucks. Like, or yeah, that is really, really bad. Like we don't need to be fixed. We're not projects to be fixed. We just need to be loved with where we're at.
Right. Uh, yeah, and that must be so difficult for someone who, your husband and boyfriend at the time. Like I can't even imagine the rage that must have been going through his body for something happening to someone he loved, and then also the helplessness from his side as well. That like even just being there and shutting up, like that must have also felt so painful to watch someone you care
Hmm.
for so much go through that and not being able to like track this person down and do all the things that we unfortunately tell boys and men that they have to be, like, you know what I mean, like you
Right.
have to be the protector so someone can feel like, oh, this was my fault, I wasn't there to protect them. And that can, I'm sure that's hard for that side of that relationship as well, where unfortunately it's just like, yeah, life sometimes is awful, and
Yeah.
awful things happen. It is amazing that, like, you're right. He's an amazing man to stick with you through that. I think that does take a very heart centered person.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point too that I don't really often get to talk about, but I do talk a little bit about in my book as far as like the collateral damage that no one talks about. And
Right.
that's, I mean, like my husband, my parents, my sister, and then really my children too. Like for several years, they were robbed of the mother that I should have been able to be for them because I was just emotionally numb.
Hey, hold on. Put a
And
pin. I'm just going to turn the light on real quick.
mhm.
It's getting crazy dark in here. So you were saying that, so even obviously I think you had your children after the event,
Yep.
right? But because you were still in that mindset of letting that situation define you and be you, that they were robbed, like the entire family, of having all of
Mhm.
you. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Wow.
it makes me wonder how many generations of men and women have we been robbed of having to their full capacity
Right.
because they haven't been given the ability to come to terms with what's been done to them
Right.
and
Like
what
even
they've
the transgenerational trauma.
yeah. Yeah, but and then I mean too that was a tangent. I know you're asking about my husband, but yeah, like I think it's been, I mean, I tell him all the time that he could coach men because he's walked through it and lived through it with me, and he still feels so like ill-equipped. He's like, no, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. If you were okay, I was okay. And but it really has been a journey for us, and it hasn't always looked pretty because life is messy. But it's just being committed to figuring to figuring this out with each other
Right.
and walking through that.
Wow. Yeah, I guess to close out, if there's anyone listening that like has
Mm-hmm.
been through what you've gone through, either if it's just physical abuse or assault or sexual assault, what would you say to them if they're still, like you said, not living, or I don't know, where would you say to start?
Mm. I would say one of my key components of kind of how my brain had to transition was I had to change my thinking from why me to what now. Like, not why did this happen to me? That's a very natural question to have and to ponder. But when I would get in that spiral of like, why me? And it's so easy to go down that, to flip it to, okay, this happened, but what now? what am I going to do now to get to where I want to be? I'm on this side of like the land of the breathing dead, and I want to be back over to the land of the living. So how do I get there? And sometimes the what now is I'm going to wake up and get out of bed and just be intentional about being mentally and emotionally present with the people around me. And that might sound really small and that might sound really trite, but it has the power to be life changing. Because if you're 1% better every day than you were the day before, then in 100 days you're 100% better. It's just simple. It's not, I shouldn't say it's simple steps. It's the small intentional steps that build on each other, and accepting the fact that it is a journey. It is a lifelong journey. There's no like arriving. I'm not going to be all of a sudden like, oh, I've arrived. I'm healed from this. No, it is a lifelong journey, and giving myself the permission and the grace to accept that there's going to be seasons that are hard. There's going to be seasons that are going to take me into a deeper level of healing. And then there's going to be seasons of joy, and it is okay to relish in those and to feel that joy for all that it is.
That's beautiful. That's a great way to, I think, to leave off. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for being here. And I do thank you for trusting me with your story and sharing with people. And it really is inspirational to hear what you've done with what happened to you, to help so many people and inspire so many people, I'm sure, like men and women, because I think everyone can relate to having the lowest point of their life, and you either own it or it owns you. And you're clearly owning this, but pushing back for everyone else. So yeah, thank you very much for being here and for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.